When we last left, Paul was sitting in a Roman jail, writing to a new church in Colossae. He had moved from an encouraging letter to some heady theology to poetic depths, and now he was applying his theology to real life. So we're going to pick this up at chapter 3, verses 12 to 17. I think that's where we left it the last time. Clothe yourselves. Chapter 3, 12 to 17.
Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him.
Great, thank you. This is one of many lists of virtues and vices. That's what the biblical scholars call this type of literature, virtues and vices. So these are obviously the virtues, okay? Paul uses the language of the dressing room here. You're getting dressed. You've taken off some stuff. Now you have to put on some stuff. And the first thing that you put on is compassion. Compassion. I think we talked a little bit about this last week, didn't we? Yeah, I think a little bit. And what we mentioned was that this is a very rich word within the New Testament. In Greek, it's splagna. And it has a kind of a gutsy feel because that's what it means. It's the guts. Because the ancients believed that your compassion was located down here in your bowels. You've heard about the bowels of compassion. And Jesus was often described as having compassion on someone. What does it mean to you to have compassion? How do you know a compassionate person?
They're empathetic.
Empathetic, that's a wonderful word, isn't it? That means they feel with you, okay? Maybe you're telling them about something and you notice, and it's painful to you, and you notice there's a little bit of tears welling up in their eyes, you know, and yeah, that's good. Yeah, Mary?
I think of understanding.
Understanding. You can understand what another person is going through. Okay. Yeah, you understand that. And it goes beyond just up here, doesn't it? Yeah, it goes beyond the head. Yeah, Larry?
They really care.
Yeah, they really do care. It's more than just, oh, that's too bad, gosh, you know, yeah. Or worse, that's too bad. You know, I had the same thing happen to me back in '86, you know, and oh gosh, doesn't that get you? It's yeah. Okay, that's compassion. You can feel it. Then he moves from compassion to kindness. Now think about the connection between those two words. You have compassion. How does kindness hook in with compassion? Yeah.
That's the action that takes place after.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's one thing to say, I feel with you. It's another thing to say, and so I would like to do something out of my kindness. I want to do something. Okay. Kindness moves us into action. Then there is humility. Humility. Okay. This is a tough one. How would you describe humility?
Lack of arrogance.
Lack of arrogance. That's a good way of approaching it. Coming through the back door. All right. You're not full of yourself. Pat?
Tom Brady, if you watch, he's humble if you watch him after that. He doesn't keep everything for himself. He passes it off to his teammates.
Oh, Tom Brady. You know, I've never thought, I guess I've always seen him as kind of arrogant. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear there's another side to him. That's good. But I mean, 7 Super Bowls, you know, it's, you can be a little arrogant after number 6, I guess. But yeah, well, it's good to know. Okay, so you when you say humility, certain people come to your mind. All right, Tom Brady. Who else comes to your mind? Who is a truly humble person? We may not know him. You may, or her. You may have to describe them to us.
Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa. Yeah.
Gandhi.
Gandhi.
People
Yeah.
who do things selflessly.
Selflessly.
Jimmy
Okay.
Carter.
Jimmy Carter. Yeah. Yes.
Many of my friends.
Who?
Many of
Many of my friends. Yeah. So, and if you say, well, I am humble, what does that say about your humility?
You're not.
Okay, it's really tricky there, isn't it? Okay. There is a phony kind of humility. When you're in the presence of a truly humble person, you're very impressed with that. You're really taken with it. But there is a phony kind of humility as well. There's that, oh, shucks, twerk nothing sort of thing. Some people have a real hard time with compliments. Are you one? Many are, okay? They have a hard time with compliments. If I were to say, for example, Margaret, my dear, that was such a beautiful prelude that you played last Sunday with, and it was such virtuosity, such passion. Now, there'd be a number of ways that Margaret could respond to that. She could say,
Who are you and what you was my husband?
okay.
That's the fourth one.
She could say, well, I'm glad you have the musical ability to see my virtuosity. Is that humility? I don't think so. Oh, no, you don't have to say that. Okay, that's a common one. How else? Someone throws a compliment at you. What do you say?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. If you're of a religious bent, you could say, oh, to God be the glory. Mhm. We have a pastor who's a dear friend of ours. And whenever I say to him, and it's often because he's a great preacher, whenever I say, Tim, you really outdid yourself with that sermon today. That was spot on. You got the text, you presented it, and Tim will say,
God is good.
God is good. How do you react to that? And he does mean that. I mean, that's not a phony kind of a thing.
Well, and you know he means it.
You do.
So you accept that he knows who it's coming from.
Yeah.
But for someone else that you're not sure of,
Yeah.
you wonder.
It's kind of a throw-out line. And I'm always tempted to say, when he says, oh, God is good, I always said, yeah, and so are you. Which is why I gave you the compliment in the first place, right? Okay. How do you know when you're in the presence of a truly humble person? How do you feel in the presence of a humble person?
Blessed.
Blessed. How do you mean, Blue?
I'm always in the presence.
Oh, yes, he is in a wonderful way. But
I really feel that he's an example for me, and so I'm blessed through that.
good. That's a wonderful thing. Good.
Mary?
So I hand over here. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be humble. You just are.
Ah, great insight. You can't be humble. You just are humble. All right.
My example is Jeannie Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
She just, I've known her for 30 years and she just, I can't explain it.
Yeah. She is in a wonderful way. And think about this. If you were to say to some people, you know, he really is a humble person, they would take that as a negative trait, wouldn't they? Humble, huh? You don't get ahead in life by being humble in this world, you know? But think of the strength that there is in humility. There is strength in humility. You don't have to prove yourself, do you? You know who you are, you know who they are, you know what the situation is, and you can put yourself under the strength of God. You don't have to lift up yourself.
Sometimes I think if I'm in the presence of a humble person, they don't talk a lot about themselves.
Yes.
They don't, in fact, they don't talk a lot at all. Some of the least talkative people, and they are, listen to you,
Yep, that's very good.
but don't
Repeat-
talk
repeat
about
that.
themselves.
Yeah, but when you're in the presence of a truly humble person, they're not talking about themselves a lot. Matter of fact, they may not even talk a lot. They're silenced. They're quiet. They let you talk. Okay. Yeah. When I think of a truly humble, strong person, I think of Vern Gunderman, who was Margaret's first supervising pastor in her ministry. Later became a very good friend of ours, married us, and he was a truly humble person. But he was no milquetoast. He had some real strength to him. Paul says humility, put on humility. Okay. Any other thoughts with humility? This is a rich one.
I was going to say, being in the presence of someone that's humble, I feel jealous because I wish I could be like that.
Dave feels jealous because he, in the presence of a humble person, because he wishes he could be that humble, be like that. Yeah, because it does take strength of character, doesn't it? in the best sense. Okay. So meekness. All right, this is a different one. Now, do you see a connection? Humility over here, meekness over here. Matter of fact, they sound like synonyms, don't they? Yeah, but they're not. How is a meek person different than a humble person?
I think in our society today, someone who is meek, that would not be a compliment.
In our society today, to say somebody was meek, that does not sound like a compliment. What comes to your mind when you think of meek?
Weak.
Weak, yeah. Weak, yeah,
Inaction.
right. Passive, yeah. The famous theologian Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady says, it's not the earth the meek inherit, it's the dirt. Ooh, that gets you, doesn't it? But ironically, the Greek word for meek carries with it a whole different sort of temperament. The word is preotes, and I looked up the definition, properly temperate, displaying the right blend of force and reserve. Properly temperate, displaying the right blend of force and reserve. Avoids unnecessary harshness, yet without compromising or being too slow to use necessary force. This is a balanced person. Now, I don't know how this got translated. Well, I do know how it got translated meek, but the baggage that we bring to meek is a lot different, I think, than historically has been in that term. Yeah, Larry.
I don't know where it is in the Bible that says meek will inherit the earth.
That's in the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, and we begin a study on that on February 25th. And you want to be here and bring your friends.
Is that a commercial?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Thank
You set me up very nicely. Yeah. So meek, you have just the right balance of strength and reserve. You know when to hold back, but you also know when you have to express yourself. Now, how does that shape the meaning of the word or the sound of the word? You're meek. Within that context, you say, yeah, I wish I could be that way, you know? See, somebody says something, or I'm online and I read something and I get so angry and I just have to respond, click, 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 push send, and then say, oh my, what did I just do? And who did I send that to, right? The internet really makes it hard to be meek, doesn't it? Because you get hooked and you have to do something about it, huh? Yeah, Hilda.
What I like in the message, it says quiet strength.
Oh, very good. Quiet strength, says Gene Peterson in the message. Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. How many would describe yourself as meek within that context?
Depends on the situation.
Yeah. Mike Weber, I describe you as meek in that sense. You're no fading wallflower though. So, okay. Shrinking violet. That's good, yeah. Okay, so put on meekness. Yeah.
One thing I've been learning as of late is to listen.
Yep. That's good.
Comments, you don't need to talk about everything, just listen.
Just listen. Yeah. Very good, Chuck. Thank you. Yeah. Very good. Patience, bearing with one another. If this quarantine situation that we've been in for almost a year, we're coming up to our first anniversary of quarantine. Do you realize that? Let's have a big party somewhere. Let's all get together and take off our masks and celebrate our quarantine. Yeah. Oh, can't do it. But I think if we've learned anything from this year-long experience, it is patience. Patience. Nothing can be done. There's nothing you can do. Well, there are three things you can do. You can wear your mask, keep a social distance, and wash your hands. Thank you, Dr. Fauci. Okay. But beyond that, you must be patient. I mean, that's what the epidemiologists are telling us. That's what, some politicians are telling us, at least. That's what our inner sense is telling us. How is your patience holding up under quarantine? How are you doing? Not great.
Some days better than others.
Yep. Yep. Talking with somebody the other day, how are you doing? Oh, same as I did yesterday, same as I did the day before, same as I did last week, last month, you know? There's this kind of repetition. It's the old Groundhog Day movie, you know? Yeah, it's tough to be patient. How does your impatience manifest itself?
Driving.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I'm patient. There's other people that aren't.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now let's go back to humility. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, in driving.
Someone loses their patience, they become angry.
Yes.
I mean, that was even before quarantine.
Yes.
You tap danced on my last nerve, and now.
Yeah. Okay. When you become impatient, how do you calm yourself down? What do you do to restore a sense of patience to you? Helps, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Use sign language.
You, David.
It was Larry.
Oh, it was Larry who said that. See, I get impatient because I can't see who's saying things at the mask there. Okay. There is a beautiful synonym for patience, and that is forbearance. That's a beautiful word, isn't it? Forbearance. We're active in bearing with somebody else. Okay. Paul wants us to put on patience.
I like the word acceptance.
Acceptance. Yeah.
You really have to work on it.
Yep. Yeah. You have to accept the situation.
It's hard to.
In some cases, it's hard. Yeah. In some cases, you have to accept the other person as they are. Yeah. Thanks. Very good. If someone, forgiveness, put on forgiveness. If someone has a complaint against you, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. What comes to mind?
Lord's Prayer.
Forgive us our debts, trespasses, sins, as we forgive those who, okay? And that's a tough one. When we get into the Sermon on the Mount, a series beginning February 25th, right here. We're good. That's right in this room, yeah. We're going to hit the Lord's Prayer in there. And I think this is going to open up in a new way for us. Okay.
Julie has a question.
Oh, Julie, yes. Sorry.
My daughter was having a horrible issue with, her husband passed away and his children have all lawyered up against her. And they had a funeral for him and she was not invited and she was told that there would be security at the door. And so I took off to Tennessee to be Mama Bear. And when I came back, I realized how angry I was at these children.
Oh, yeah.
And when I came back to church, I prayed that we wouldn't have communion because I wouldn't be able to take it. And I talked to Margaret about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to the realization that communion and my Lord meant so much more to me than these people. I can call them petty, I can call them money grabbers, I can do anything. But in my heart, I cannot hold hatred against them because I would, like you say, you only hurt yourself.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The grudge door comes down on you, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, good. That's good. So how are you doing with that?
Good. I was, and the reason I could keep it is because I kept dwelling on it. And now I realize there's a lot more going on, a lot more important than, lawyers getting all their fees, and that's kind of the joke of it because these lawyers are the only ones that are going to get anything anyway.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Huh. When we say forgive him or forgive them, in that case, we're not talking usually about a once for all act. Forgiveness is a process, isn't it? Forgiveness can go on weeks, months, years. You're always in process. You're always coming back. You catch yourself rehearsing that act or those people who wronged you, and you want to pick at it, you want to somehow play it out in your mind because you feel just terribly righteous, don't you? You know, I was right, they were wrong, and by gum, someday God's going to let them burn, you know, that sort of thing. And then you realize what that's doing to you. And you say, something's got to happen, something's got to change, you know. If you can't do it on your own, I would suggest counseling, pastoral counseling, you know. And again, it's not something that you're going to get over once, just once. You're going to have to revisit time. But that feeling of letting that grudge go is so good. When you realize that those people no longer have power over you, like you've been letting them have power over you. Oh, just kind of, isn't that great? That's great. Yeah. Forgive one another as the Lord has forgiven you. That's crucial. To realize how God has forgiven you. It starts there, doesn't it? And then it works out in your forgiveness of another. Knowing who I am, knowing what I have done, knowing the inner sinfulness that I have, to think that God could possibly forgive me for that? Okay, that's where it all starts. Then you have to roll out, how now am I going to try to forgive that person? Whether they want to or not. I mean, if they're coming to you and saying, oh, please forgive me, please forgive me, please forgive me, you know, that's one thing. But what if they're saying, hey, that's your problem? You know, doesn't bother me, get over it, get over it. And you realize, you know, that's pretty good advice, isn't it? Get over it. So I'm going to take your advice. I'll show you, I'm going to get over it.
How many times does a person come to you and say that? Forgive me.
Forgive me.
Yeah, always. Ever.
Yeah, it's just, are you saying that's, how many times does a person come and say,
No,
forgive
I mean,
me?
how many times does a person?
Does a
I see
person
what
say
you
that?
say.
Yeah. I don't know. How would you answer that?
On occasion,
Seldom?
seldom, yeah.
Yeah.
Seldom.
Hilda?
I think when you forgive, you have to forget.
When you forgive, you have to forget. Right.
Otherwise it keeps.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike?
I think there's a fine balance there, though. I mean, I can recognize a particular person and what they did and how bad that was to the people that it affected.
Right.
I've certainly forgiven that person. I recognize it's a done deal, but I still know that what that person did was wrong.
Right. So what, okay, that's an interesting insight. I can forgive, but I still know that what that person did was wrong. Okay, so do you forgive and forget? That's the question. There's a, Cindy, be with you just a minute. There's an interesting book out. I'm not sure that it's still in print. David Augsburger. And it's one of these weird books where you look at the cover and it says, caring enough to forgive. Okay. Then you turn it upside down and it's printed upside down, the second half, caring enough not to forgive. Caring enough not to forgive. Are there times, to kind of pick up on where Mike is going with this, are there times when our care for another person means, no, I can't forgive you right now? Now, ultimately, that may come someday. When do you care enough for this person not to forgive them? Isn't that strange? Larry?
When they might hurt somebody else.
Ah, when they might hurt somebody else. That's right. Cindy?
What's going on in our society right now? I'm having a lot of difficulty having patience, having forgiveness, but sometimes I hope it will turn into positive action. But I look at, there's recent things coming out in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I know this applies across the United States, and it's our children who have not had schooling, okay? How do we forgive some of the action that has been done and the neglect of these young people? What they are identifying right now, we're more rural, so we can actually count, but you have to apply it across the United States. How many children, they're getting the virtual. Well, so many children need more guidance than that.
Yes.
The parents don't have the capacity to do that teaching, and they're finding out the numbers of children that have no contact, they've had no contact with the school systems. They're the lost children. And the percentages are soaring. They've identified in the Upper Peninsula around 30%.
Wow.
Now apply that, how do we forgive the people who are making these decisions that are destroying, in my opinion?
How do you, this is a complicated concern. Let me see if I can summarize it though. Cindy is saying, how can you forgive administrators or politicians or whoever are making decisions that keep our children out of school when statistically children are really being hurt by this? Yeah, and I'm sure those politicians say, well, it's only for your own good, you know, we got to keep kids away from each other and teachers and so on and so forth. Okay, Pat, you're going to say something.
Well, one thing is the politicians, you vote them out of office.
Yeah.
And if you're on the rural level, you join the school board, you do something about it.
Good. Yeah, Pat is saying, vote the politicians out of office and join the school board. Yeah, that's good. But yeah, because if you sit and stew about it, and it really, it grinds you, you know, you're reading the statistics, you're seeing these kids, you know, sitting in front of a computer screen all day, and you're saying, that's not called learning, all right? And it's just grinding you. But to take some action, you've gone from compassion to kindness now, haven't you? Yeah.
One of the things you can also do is get on the campaign against that person that's making that decision, and make sure they don't come back again.
Okay. Yeah, you can express your concerns about this person. And that's voting them out of office. Okay, that's it. Yeah, if that's possible. I mean, there's we don't need to get into that right now, though. But, okay. Forgiveness, remember, is an active act. Forgiveness is active. You got to work at that. But it's easier work if you can remember the one who has forgiven you. Then it takes on a whole thing. And then Paul wraps everything up. I just love this verse. Above all these, put on love, which binds everything together. He's got a big package, and now he's wrapping this all up in that wrapping paper of love. It binds everything together in perfect harmony. And now your outfit is complete. You've taken off the old clothes. You put on your glad rags. People still use that expression. I don't think so. The glad rags. You know, you're ready for the big banquet, the big party, or you're ready for to live out your baptism. Because I think baptism is lurking in the corners here with Paul. Okay. Well, interesting exercise is to look at this list of virtues and ask yourself, which of these do I need to cultivate in my life? I mean, all of them, obviously, but in all of these virtues, compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, forgiveness, love, which is kind of a priority for me? What can I work at, you know, if indeed I can work at it? And who can I bring up on board as somebody who might mentor me and help me in these things? Okay, we're taking a look now at chapter 3, verses 18 to 25, and this is a toughie. This is a toughie. Okay.
Wives, submit to your husbands.
Margaret, please read this for us. You need to do that. All right now, and read it loudly and don't hesitate.
Wives, submit to your husbands. No. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. Slaves, obey in everything those who are earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you'll receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ, for the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality.
You believe that the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done? Cindy, do you believe that about whoever's making those decisions up in the Northern Peninsula? They'll be paid back. You know, maybe the next election. I mean, hard to say. Okay, this is a toughie, isn't it? When you read those words, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. That gets your attention. We're also going to be taking a look at Ephesians 5:21 down to 33. So if you keep a finger or bookmark or something in Ephesians 5:21-33, because we'll go bounce back to that in a minute. Okay, this type of literature in the New Testament is called paranesis. Paranesis. And it means practical advice for living, practical advice in the church. And Paul is very good about that. He goes from a deep theology to the heights of poetry, and then he engages you on some very practical levels too. This is the rules of the household. Okay, you can remember paranesis if you think of two volleyball players sitting in their shorts side by side. You've got a paranesis. Just, I always want to give you these handy tips for, Okay, yeah. So to the wives, he says, submit yourselves to the husbands as is fitting to the Lord. How do you translate as is fitting to the Lord? It's just the thing that we Christian folks do. We submit ourselves to our husbands, okay? One translator renders the Greek, treat your husband with respect. Okay. Hilda, how does your friend Gene Peterson translate this? This
Which number?
This is 3:18.
Wives, understand and support your husbands by submitting to them in ways that honor the master.
What does that do to you? Have any of you women, any of you wives struggled with these words before?
Yes.
Submit yourselves to your husband. What does the word submit conjure up for you?
Give in.
Give in.
Slavery.
Slavery.
Obey.
Weakness, obey. Okay. All right. So, and those all have negative connotations, don't they? Treat your husbands to respect. That makes it a little more tempered. But then to husbands, love your wives. And the word Paul uses there is agape. Agape. And the word agape, as I'm sure you know, you've probably heard it in 100 sermons over the years, is that kind of self-giving love that asks nothing in return, right? For God so agape'd the world that he gave his only begotten son, okay? Not expecting anything in return. Now, when you put agape, your wife, next to submit to your husband, it does kind of balance things out just a little bit, does it? And then he says, don't be harsh with them, or don't embitter them. That's another translation for that word. Don't be harsh with them, or don't embitter them. What is it like to be embittered? What's that?
What'd she say?
Make them mad.
Make them mad. Okay. Yeah, don't make them mad. But the thing about being embittered is that gets down into the soul, doesn't it? Have you met embittered people? Oh my, you know it. They're on a rant. They're always talking about something. They're so angry. You're just waiting for a blood vessel to explode in their brain, They just can't let go of something. Don't embitter your wives, Paul says, okay? We'll take a look at Ephesians 5 in just a little bit. Then children, obey your parents also. Children, obey your parents also, but parents, do not provoke your children. They can become discouraged. Ooh, isn't that an insight into parenting? Have you seen families where the parents are so harsh with their kids that the kids grow up just discouraged?
But it doesn't say parents, it says fathers.
Fathers.
So mothers are excluded.
That's right. Mothers are excluded, says Lou. Yeah, you can do anything you want. Just take your best shot, Lou. That's good. Yeah, and I think the thing that needs to be pointed out with this is this is a paternal society, isn't it? This is a patristic society. This is one in which the father has all of the power. Okay, and we'll get into that in just a little bit, but they can be discouraged. All right. Finally, slaves, and now we're really Cindy.
I feel like it's the elephant sitting in the room.
The elephant in the room, says Cindy.
For today's society and reading the Bible, and if you take this literally, is this what we really believe and practice?
Do we really believe and practice this?
We do, that our husbands are always right
No, that's not what this says.
That's the same
No,
here?
not saying that.
Submit to, well, if you are submitting to your husband. Something, I mean, I can be wrong, he can be wrong.
Yeah.
Am I taking this too literally?
Well, there is another way of reading this. I want to get us into Ephesians 5 because that gets a little more in depth with this whole thing. Yeah.
If you read on, it's a two-way street. Your husband doesn't lord it over you for the sake of doing that.
Yes.
He's supposed to do it, relate to you as Christ relates to you. And
that's good.
that comes into play. So if you're both coming from that side, it's going to be different.
Okay. Think about how the family was structured back at that time.
Right.
The father was the head. The father was the head. The father represented God in that family, or in the New Testament church, represented Christ, which takes on a whole different meaning in the New Testament church. And then, everyone had their own roles in the family. They knew what they were supposed to do. The children, the mother of the household, and the slaves, because slaves were a part of that household, to remember. And if you're all working your roles right, then everything would be good. And if the family was good, then society was good, then the nation was good. So it all came down to know your place, know your place. Now, where that changes with the New Testament church is that they bring Jesus into this. Darn, they have to throw Christ into this because Christ deals with folks in a whole different way. Agape, there we go again. Okay, so that's within the household. Now, if that's tough, Cindy, with wives to husband, think about slaves. Think about slaves. These words were used over years to keep slaves in their place. Abolitionists, those who fought against slavery, were seen as being unfaithful to the Bible. They were heretics because it says right here, slaves, obey your masters. It says that. Okay, and in chapter 4, we're going to meet this guy named Onesimus. Who was Onesimus? He was a slave, right? What did Onesimus do? He ran away. He did not obey his master. And now Paul is bringing him back with Tychicus, bringing him back to Philemon in order that there might be restoration and reconciliation here. I mean, I do have a problem with this when it's applied extremely literalistically, okay? How do you justify spousal abuse? There's a thing on the news last night. I forget who this football player was. He was not married to this woman, but he beat the daylights out of her. She, if she ever recovers from that beating, Now, somebody could say, well, you should submit yourself, right? Submit yourself to her. Yeah, but love your wife, agape your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Larry?
I always think about the woman she's sitting there after she's been beat up, and he has to go to sleep sometime.
Oh my. So now we need to revisit forgive one another as Christ has forgiven you. Okay. Notice that within the New Testament church, though, relationships are voluntary. They're not of the law, they're voluntary. How does Margaret submit herself to me? How do I agape her as Christ loved it? It's because we are connected to Christ and we're constantly working to make that Christ connection our connection as well, okay? Take a look at Ephesians 5. Let's see, where are we here? Ephesians 5, 22 to 6:9.
I like you're adding that 21st verse, though. You said 21 before.
Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Yes. Yeah, 21 is very important. Be subject to one another, submit yourselves to one another out of reverence for Christ. Cindy, does this feel better for you?
I was trying to find it.
Ephesians 5, 21 down to the end of the chapter. And I'm just going to read it through for you. Wives, be subject to your husbands. Yeah, we just heard about that in Colossians, Paul. As to the Lord. Subject to your husband as to the Lord. How do we submit ourselves to the Lord? Do I submit myself to Jesus because if I didn't, I'd go to hell? Is that why I submit myself?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I submit myself to Jesus for all that he's done for me. Okay. He's my Lord. Okay.
No, I like that statement.
Yeah. Why? Be subject to your husband. 23, for the husband is the head of the wife, okay, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, if you stop there, the husband is the head of the wife, period, okay? But he goes on, doesn't he? There's a model, as Christ is the head of the church. How is Christ the head of the church, you ask yourself?
Loving.
Is Jan on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm missing something. Okay. As the church is subject to Christ, so let wives be subject in everything to their husbands. But as the church is subject to Christ, there's a heavy load of love there, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Heavy load of love. Okay. Husbands, 25, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Even so, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. No man ever hates his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. I'm going to stop there. So, okay, let's see. Wives, submit yourselves to the church, to your husband, as to Christ. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for it, which means dying for it.
Oh, here we go again.
Okay, so let's see. She's got to submit herself to me, and I've got to die for her. Guess who gets the better end of that bargain? Right? Yeah. Yeah. But what's working itself out here is that Paul is using the structure of the family at that time, but he's very subtly manipulating it. He's turning it around. I have never, in all of my years of ministry, had a bride, as we were planning their wedding ceremony, say to me, you know, Pastor, I really want you to do that Ephesians 5, Colossians 3 number. You know, I really want you to preach hard on my submitting myself to my husband. Never. I'll give that up. There's one who challenged me to do it, and I did. And yeah, they didn't throw anything. So, but when you see it within that mutuality, okay. Now, what have we just done, Cindy? Have we taken this seriously? Yes, we have. But we've also allowed our context to speak to it, and it speaks to our context. You tread very lightly when someone says, "Oh, this doesn't apply to us. Let's throw it out." Okay, this is a whole different world. You know, we don't have to pay any attention to that kind of thing. Now you get into the book of Leviticus, and you might have to do something with that. We don't use stoning pits anymore. Okay, but for the most part, what we're saying is, Lord, open me up so that these words spoken to another culture 2,000 plus years ago can speak to us, can speak to my heart right now. And I think this has an awful lot to say about marriage, you know, and how it is. You know, when you talk to somebody, let's do a survey here. Whether your spouse is living or not, how many here were married 25 years? How many here were married 35 years? How many here were married 45 years? 55? 60?
56.
56.
Wow.
Very good. Okay. All right. Then you
66.
Jan, what did you just ask Bill? How'd you make it?
No, I said, how long have you been married?
How long have you been married?
He
You bring,
didn't have his hand up.
yeah. That's good. Watch it, Bill.
My memory isn't that good.
You never, that's true. That's true. All kinds of jokes about that. We won't go there though. When you ask people who've been married over an extended period of time, how did you do it? What is your secret to staying married? You know,
One day at a time.
one day at a time. Thank you, Dennis. Okay. Yeah, one day at a time. That's good. Other secrets?
Committed.
Committed. Great.
Supporting each other, loving each other.
Supporting, loving each other, not continual obedience to this man even though he was a real jerk, No, but you get an idea that somehow we're in this for the long haul. We're going to make it work. And I will submit to you as Christ, or as the church submits to Christ. I will love you as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for. I'll be willing to give to give myself up for you. I will. That's how much I love you. Okay.
I always blame it on my extreme humbleness.
Extreme humbleness. Shot that one out of the water. Okay. That's good. Okay. So when you put Colossians 3 together with Ephesians 5, Ephesians 5 kind of opens that up. Now, what you do with slavery, that's another thing. How do you make that application to slavery? Okay. To me, what Paul is saying about slaves, obey your masters. And again, what is he, bonds, douloi, slaves, obey in everything, those who are your earthly masters, not because you want people to like you, okay, but whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord. Work as for the Lord. And the Lord ain't this guy who stands over you with a whip. The Lord is the one who stands over you with a cross. That's who we're working for, really. So how do you apply that then to life in this age?
I think first we have to throw out the idea of what 1850 slavery was. Back then, some of these slaves are trying to work off a debt.
Right.
And at some point, it might even happen. And to them, being a slave in this household is better than, to compare it now, being homeless.
Right.
Or whatever. So, as soon as you say slavery, we all just dive in, to the mid 1800s.
Right.
And a lot of the slaves they weren't brought from places, they could have been from the same village.
Yep.
I feel like most of them are trying to work off a debt.
There was one type, yeah, and when you study slavery, you find out that there are different orders of slaves, but ultimately it's one person owning another person. There was a terrible thing online this morning. It was a republished poster from the 1860s on a sale of slavery.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. They're $8. They weren't males, male human beings. They were bucks. I don't know if it said wenches or whatever, but I mean, it was awful, just awful. But within this society, within Paul's society, there were different grades of slaves. Some slaves even owned slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Some slaves even own slaves. So yeah, you got to be careful, but it's always, you're tempted like Onesimus to take off, but no, you obey as you would obey the Lord. And again, if everyone's doing their role, it's all fitting together, see? And society's doing good, the nation is doing good, and so on and so forth, okay? Okay, let's, I do want to wrap up here in the next few minutes. Ephesians 4, 2-6, or I'm sorry, no. Colossians 4, 2-6, yeah.
Masters, treat your slaves justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. Continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us that God may open to us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison, that I may make it clear which is how I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person.
Okay, thank you. Notice the compactness of this sentence. It's as though every single word carries a special meaning to it. Continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. I took the liberty of looking up the message that Hilda uses in there. Pray diligently, stay alert, keep your eyes wide open in gratitude. Yeah, there's so much within that. How do you pray watchfully? How do you pray watchfully with thanksgiving? When you pray, are you praying watchfully? In Buddhism, one of the great practices of Buddhism is mindfulness. Mindfulness means that you are very aware of all that is around you all the time. Good luck. I couldn't even find my glasses today, okay? And Bill forgot that he was married for all, no. But if you're mindful, you're focused in on what you're doing, okay? When we pray, are you always mindful?
No.
Don't your eyes go, your mind's drifting, it's all over the place, you know? And then you find yourself, oh, darn, I really wanted to come back to that, okay? Paul is saying, pray watchfully, be mindful of what you're saying. And with thanksgiving, when you're praying with thanksgiving, you're praying under that umbrella of gratitude. God has given me so much. And God has even given me the opportunity to talk back to God, to pray to God. Man, that's something else, isn't it? And then he moves in verse 3, at the same time, pray for us, that God may open a door to us for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am now in prison. I've been jailed for this thing, okay? That I ought to make it clear how I ought to speak, okay? The great theologian of the church, he who is above all others, the expert in God's activity in Jesus Christ, wants us to pray for him. Boy, doesn't that strike you as weird? What in the world would I pray for with St. Paul, okay? How many times in a day do you say to somebody, you're talking and they've got some issue going on in their life, maybe it's physical stuff, maybe it's something else, and you say to them, well, okay, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. That's happened to me 2 times already today. Okay, now, question, will you really pray for them? Or is that just a throwaway line? You know? The older I get, the more I have to make notes, okay? So today I'm going to pray for, right in the pocket there, okay? And make sure when we get to our prayers in the morning that, you know, as we're praying for people, they get on the list, okay?
Pastor, what I've been learning lately is don't pray by rote. Give it a chance, and let your heart take over, and let it come from your heart.
Conversational prayer. Good. That's a really good thing. Yeah. Talk to God.
What I find out is I'm so driven by trying to remember all those people I'm supposed to pray for, and I never know if I can say, you read those in my heart, because I know I'm always forgetting somebody. So mine is there's parts of it that are pretty rote.
Name wise, especially for me,
Yes.
when I'm swimming, I swim a lot of prayers.
Yes.
A lot of times, and
That's good.
There is a routine to it.
Yeah. Is it, and do you ask people to pray for you?
Yes.
Is that easy for you to do that? To say, pray for me?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. It's not always easy for everybody. Okay. Why is Paul asking people to pray for him right now?
He wants the Spirit to really work in the lives of the people around him.
Yes.
So pray for that Spirit to work in them.
Yeah, pray for the Spirit. You notice that Paul really isn't asking prayers for him, is he? He's asking prayers for his ministry, okay? He wants to be able to witness to his Lord that, you know, their lives can be just so terribly different, wonderfully different, if they can just accept Jesus, okay? So he closes by asking for their prayers, okay? An awful lot here, but I really do want to figure out. And then the final greetings, just a listing of names, but there's a book out, I think I mentioned it last week. I forget the name of it now. But it kind of goes into these biographies of some of these people that Paul just throws out within the New Testament. Tychicus. If I ever would have had a son, I'd have named him Tychicus, okay? Hey, Ticky, let's go here, okay? We'll tell you all about my affairs. He's a beloved brother, faithful minister, fellow servant. I have sent him to you for this very purpose. So Tychicus is very significant within Paul's circle. Okay, so there's Timothy, and now Tychicus is going to be taking, even perhaps taking this letter that Paul has written, okay? And he's going to take with him Onesimus. We know who this guy is, okay? And he is one of yourselves, he says in verse 9. He's not just another slave, but he's one of you. He's a member of your family, okay? Aristarchus, we've heard of him before, founding missionary, maybe this church. Mark, cousin of Barnabas, concerning whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, receive him. Jesus Justus. It's interesting when you say the name Jesus, you always want to say Jesus, son of Joseph of Nazareth, but that's not him. This is another Jesus. And Justus is a Roman name. Isn't that interesting? So he's got an Old Testament name, a Hebrew name, Yeshua, and now he's Jesus Justus, okay? But these are the men of the circumcision. These are fellow Jews. Epaphras, 12, who has been one of yourselves, a servant of Christ Jesus, greets you. That means he's with Paul, but now he's greeting you. 4 and 13, I bear him witness that he has worked hard for you and for those in Laodicea and for those in Hierapolis, okay, so other congregations. And then Luke, oh, you know Luke, don't you?
The doctor.
The doctor, Dr. Luke, okay, the beloved physician. He greets you. And Demas, whoever Demas was.
Christian worker who would later desert Paul.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Demas was not high on Paul's popularity list, but apparently his desertion of Paul happens at a later time. Give my greeting to the church at Laodicea, and Nympha, who's a very special woman, and the church in her house, which means she's got big bucks. She is really rich. If she has a house big enough to hold the church, she's a very wealthy woman. And there's some speculation that when Paul hit town and he'd go to the synagogue and do some work in the synagogue, then he'd start scouting out who were the rich widows in town, okay? And snuggling up, figuratively speaking, and getting a relationship with them because they were the ones who could provide. And if their hearts were turned over to their Lord, they could make a real difference in the lives of others, okay? And when this letter, 16, has been read among you, have it also read in the church of the Laodiceans, and see that you read also the letter from Laodicea. Big question there. Where is that letter? The letter to Laodicea. Okay, from Laodicea. Say to Archippus, see that you fulfill the ministry which you have received in the Lord. Don't give up, Archippus. Don't drop things. And then this very telling verse in 18, I, Paul, write this greeting with my own hand. Remember my fetters. What are fetters?
Chains.
Chains, my fetters, okay. Grace be with you. So he starts out the letter with grace. He ends the letter with grace. It's all wrapped up in grace. And that is the book of Colossians. Thank you. That's good.